Okay, so I'll go through the critical thinking exercise right now. Hopefully this will answer any unanswered questions. So the first thing that we're going to do, I'm sure most of you have already done, open up a new instance of Revit. I'll go through this first part really quickly because I know everyone's very familiar with how to do this. Okay, so we're going to do a new project with of course I clicked on the wrong template. Whenever I'm recording, the mouse is a little jumpy. Click on architectural template. That'll go ahead and upgrade itself. Let's look at our first step. First step is going to be to create our levels. So we're going to have level 1, 2, and 3 with 10-foot intervals. So I'm going to go over to my elevation, or any elevation will work. And we already have level 1, we already have level 2, so all we need to do is add a level 3. So I'm going to click on level. Let's do a 10-foot offset, and I can create level 3. Okay, and that's all set for the first step. All right, so we have level 1, 2, and 3. So let's create a wall type. I am actually I'm just going to use one of the walls that we have already inside Revit. I think everyone here is very comfortable with creating that wall type. Okay, so I'm just going to use one of the ones that we already have. Click on wall, just so I'm not spending 5 minutes doing something that we've done 10 times. I'll just use this one right here. Okay, so we're going to do I think the outer perimeter of our wall is going to be 20 by 40. Okay, so I'm going to use my rectangle tool here, and I'm going to change my location line to core face exterior. Okay, and now if I look at my model, you can do core face exterior, or if you want a dimension to the exterior face of the finish, which might be ideal as well, especially when you have a wall that's so thick like we have. When you have when you could potentially have 2, 3, 4 inches of finish material on your wall, sometimes it is important to actually dimension to the exterior of the finish, just because those 4 inches could be very critical. So however you want to do it is fine. So I'll do finish face exterior, and then from here I'm going to make this 20 by 40. Okay, so let's just check our dimensions really quickly. I know this is going to be a little incorrect. Let's change that to 20. And let's change this to 40. Okay, so now we have the correct outer extents of my building. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to the center so that when I open up my elevations, that it's not all crooked and non-centered. All right, so we have something that looks like this. All right, I think all of our walls, let's just make sure they go from level 1. Let's change this, our top constraint, to level 3. Okay, which is actually the same as the unconnected height of 20 feet. I think the next step was to edit the profile so that we have a sloped roof. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go over to our north elevation. So I'm going to go to my elevations, click on north. Okay, and we have something that looks like this. I'm going to click on that north wall. I'm going to click on edit profile. And if we look at what we have given to us for the critical thinking exercise, the slope on the first initial part of the slope starts at level 2. So that's all we really need to create the proper slope. Okay, so
notice you're on the south elevation that you were looking at. You're on
this one right here. Okay. Good point. So let's actually go to the south, and it'll just be the opposite. So I'll click on this wall, and I'm going to go to edit profile, and I'm going to draw a line from this corner up to this corner. Okay, so because we need to have a continuous boundary around our edit profile, I'm going to go ahead and delete the top line. Okay, I know these lines connect nicely. If you ever want to double check to make sure that they are connecting the way that they should, you can always click on your trim tool, click on both lines. If they don't click like they're not right now, that means that they're connected properly. Okay, if it was something like this, maybe extended beyond a little bit, it would allow you to connect those two lines. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and connect the bottom two lines. we'll have something that looks like this. I'll go ahead and hit the check mark, and that's going to be one of two walls. Okay, so you could create the other wall one of two ways. You could either just copy this wall over, or you could edit the profile of this one to match the profile of the one that you just created. Should be very easy. I'm going to go ahead and hit edit profile. I can then use my pick lines tool. I'm going to select the slope of the back wall like so, and then I can use my trim tool and just trim up the walls accordingly. Okay, delete that upper line, don't need it. Go ahead and hit the check mark, and our walls now match exactly the same. Okay, so this wall is going to want to be the same height as this one, or we can just go over and change our top constraint to level 2. All right, and that should be good. Right now we have a couple kind of weird instances. We have a couple little kind of goofy jogs in our walls like you see up here. Don't worry about that right now, it's okay. If you were to actually add a roof to this structure, which we will here I think next week, there's a button that you would actually end up pressing that just says to attach the walls below to the rooftop, so you actually wouldn't see any of these weird little jogs in the walls. So we're just gonna go ahead and leave those as is for now. And if you look at the rest of our little structure, all of our corners align up properly, so that looks good. Okay. Next step, let's create the storefront. Okay, I think everyone's probably pretty clear on how to add the other elements. Okay, but let's focus on how to create or how to add these additional elements. So let's focus on creating these storefronts like shown here in the diagrams. Okay, so first one, we're going to need to create a storefront type that matches this first instance right here. Okay, and then we'll create type 2 that matches diagram 4. Okay, so right here, one of the clues that we're given is that we have 7 equal segments. Okay, so I am going to go over to architecture, and I'm going to click on wall architectural, and I am going to go down to curtain wall, and I'm going to click on storefront. So from here, I'll go ahead and click on edit type. I'm going to create a new storefront. I'm going to call this storefront type 1. Okay, so storefront type 1. And the critical part about storefront type 1, if we go back and refer to this, is that we don't have any vertical mullion. Okay, so notice that we have no vertical mullion. Unlike for diagram 4, you notice that we have several vertical mullions. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do under vertical grid, instead of maximum spacing, we're going to change that to none. Okay, we're going to change that to none. So that's going to give no vertical mullions in this particular storefront assembly. All right. So for the other ones, we need to focus on the horizontal grid. So we have 7 equal segments for our horizontal grid. All right, so I'm going to go to horizontal grid. Instead of fixed distance, I'm going to do fixed number. Okay, so fixed number. All right, and the rest of these, I'm going to go ahead and just leave these as is for now. We'll actually end up coming back and likely changing these in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to go to storefront type 1, and then you notice if you go down to where it says horizontal grid, and it says horizontal grid number 4, I'm actually going to change that to 7. Now let's just try 7. I think it's actually going to end up being something different. I think what it means is by putting down 7, it's going to create 7 actual mullions. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think we're actually going to end up putting 6. But let's just try that and see what happens. Let's try 7, and let's see what result we get out of this. Now, some of you may have taken a different approach to this. Instead of actually changing this to fixed number, another approach that you could have taken, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, is a lot of times there are several ways to get to the end result. So, and this is one of those examples. You may have also changed this to maximum spacing. You may have changed this to maximum spacing, put something like 3 feet, and you probably could have gotten the exact same result as going to fixed number. Okay, I'm going to leave it as fixed number. Go ahead and hit OK. And I am going to actually change border type 2. I'm going to change border type 2 to none. Okay, that's going to make sure that's going to make the border on the corner have no mullion. You could also change that to 5-inch by 5-inch mullion. Okay, you could change that to 5 by 5 and then put none for the other one as well. You would have the same, it would have the same effect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. I'm going to go to my level 1 floor plan, and it shows in the exercise that we want to have equal spacing on both sides of the wall. Okay, so if I go down to this corner and I click on wall and I go to storefront 1, I can go ahead and start at the midpoint of my wall. All right, starting at the midpoint will tell me that I have equal spacing on both sides of the wall. Okay, so I'm going to click down and I'm going to go ahead and draw this as 10 feet. Okay, and it's going to look something like that. It's going to look a little funny for now, not to worry about it. Let's just go ahead and see what it looks like in actuality. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier when I said that likely the number, we're actually going to need to make that 6. Okay, I'm going to hit apply, and that allows us to have 6 equal spacings. So what that number refers to is not necessarily the number of spacings that we have in the storefront. It's actually the number of mullions that we have in the storefront. Okay, kind of a little deceiving a little bit, but now you know what exactly that means. Okay, so let's see. I think this looks good. Diagram 4. This looks good. West 2x2 fixed window. Okay, so let's create the next one. The next one's going to be a little bit different. All right, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal segments and 7 equal segments. Okay, and we're actually going to want to click on this storefront before moving to the next part. And I think a part of that was to have a 2-foot gap before we go to the top. So if we want to leave a 2-foot gap between the top of our wall and the top of our storefront, how would we go about doing that?
Click the rectangle over there.
Right here?
Yeah, move it down.
You could do that. That could get you, that could actually get the correct end result. I know there's a little bit better way to do this though. If we actually just go over to our constraints, it's always better to just punch in the number under our constraints because we know it's exactly what we want. Okay, so I'm going to make the top constraint of this piece of storefront level 3, and I'm going to change the offset to -2 feet. Okay, so -2 feet, and I'm going to hit apply. Okay, now I know the top of that storefront is exactly 2 feet from the top of level 3. Okay, so it's always good to punch in our dimensions versus just grabbing the little arrows and just dragging them from place to place, because it's so hard to get the exact dimension when you actually do that. Okay, so sometimes you're successful, but I'd say a majority of the time you're actually not. So always try to have a better habit of just punching in our constraints. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Other than this corner doesn't quite look correct yet, but that's okay. We'll fix this here in a few seconds. So let's move on to the next step. Next step, we want 5 equal segments and 7 equal segments. So we're going to do the same thing that we did for this previous corner. All right, so we're going to go to level 1. I'm going to click on wall, and I'm going to hit edit type, and I'm going to click on duplicate. I'm going to call this storefront type 2. All right, I'm going to hit OK. So just like before, we have a fixed number for our horizontal grid, and I'm also going to change the vertical grid to fixed number as well. Okay, you could also do maximum spacing and just figure out what the correct spacing is. You would get the same end result. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And just like before, I'm going to alter these vertical grids accordingly. So knowing what we know for diagram number 3, what are we going to need to change our vertical? What numbers are we going to need to punch in to get 5 equal segments for our vertical spacing and 7 equal spaces for our horizontal spaces?
So 4 and 6.
4 and 6, exactly. It's going to be just one less than what it's shown here. That's exactly correct. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change the vertical to 4. That looks good. I'm going to change the horizontal to 6. All right, and just like before, let's see, edit type. Let's change vertical border type 2. I'm going to change that to 5 by 5. Okay, and then from here I'm going to start from the midpoint of my wall. I'm going to go ahead and draw it right to the corner. Okay, we're still going to get kind of a funky condition right here. I'm sure everybody has probably ran into this today. All right, to where one of your walls was still continuing to overlap. Okay, Before I go ahead and fix this though, let's click on our piece of storefront that we've created here. I'm going to change the top constraint to level 3, and I'm going to change my top offset to what?
2 inch.
Minus 2 feet.
2 feet.
So minus 2 feet. Okay. So now what's nice about this is that all of our mullions now align. Okay, so that's another big aspect of changing our constraints to match on both sides, is that all of our horizontal mullions will wrap from side to side. Okay, so now we have a couple different things that we have to solve. So one is we need to edit the profile of our curtain wall on this side so that it matches the slope of our wall, and we also need to fix this kind of goofy overlapping wall that we have over here in the corner. So one thing that Revit does, and it's always done this, is that it can never get a corner glazing condition correct. It always will have an overlapping wall, and it's done it ever since I started using Revit, but it's easily fixed. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to, let's edit the profile of this first, because this next step will actually make a little bit more sense. So from here, I'm going to click on Edit Profile, and let's look at this in pure elevation. And what we're going to want is we're going to want to match the slope from the wall that we already created. So I'm going to use my Pick Lines tool, okay? And what am I going to change the offset to? 2 feet, okay? Correct. So I'm going to change that to 2 feet, and I'm just going to pick my lines from the slope that I've already created, okay? So I'm going to pick that as 2 feet, and I now have the upper boundary of my storefront wall. Okay, so just like we did when we created the sloped wall initially, we're going to go ahead and trim the lines accordingly. Okay, so I'm going to delete the top line. I don't need it, and I'll use my trim tool to trim this side and to also trim this side. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark. Okay, everyone should probably get this message right here. All this is saying is that it cannot, well, what it says is it cannot create curtain wall mullion. The portion of the curtain grid it was placed no longer exists. That's okay. It's kind of saying that in a kind of a way that's a little intimidating, because what does that exactly mean? All it's telling you is that you had curtain wall and mullions up here, and now by creating the edited profile, it no longer exists. We're okay with that. We intentionally did that on purpose. Okay, so we're okay with that. So we're going to click on Delete Elements. Okay, and now we have this nice sloped curtain wall. Okay, so we're looking good so far. Let's take the next step. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to fix this little problem here where our wall is actually overlapping our curtain wall. Okay, and some of you guys may have that instance on this wall. It may also have happened on this wall. Okay, there's not really a rhyme or a reason why it would do one or the other. If you probably created this wall here first, this is probably going to be the overlapping wall. So, but regardless of which one is overlapping, whatever one it is, we're going to click on it, and we're going to click on Edit Profile. Okay, so because the reason why it actually does that is because our curtain wall embeds into the wall, there's just that little sliver of wall left at the very end that's not embedding. So that's why we see that. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove that from our corner. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to trim around our curtain wall. So I'm going to use my Pick Lines tool, and I'm going to select the left side of my curtain wall, and I'm going to select the top slope of my curtain wall. All right, and then from here, just like we did before, I'm going to go ahead and trim. So I'm going to trim from here to here, eliminating this line on this side. Let's trim this corner to connect those lines, and I'm going to trim these two corners to eliminate this bottom. Okay, and then from there, because now we have a continuous pink line all the way around, I can hit the check mark, and these two walls up here will continue to intersect and connect, which is what we want, and we now have a cleaner condition over here on the bottom. So now all we have to do to actually finish this is just connect those two corners. Okay, so I'm gonna.
Is this recorded? Or?
This is recorded, yes. So you'll see this on YouTube later. So from here, I can go ahead and just pull this back, unjoin elements. Let's see, what are we getting that's conflicting here? That's our 5 by 5. Okay, that looks good. Let me go back to level 1. I always like to go over and click on disallow join. I'm just going to pull these back a little bit. Let's see, what is that right there?
You have a L.
Oh,
shape.
I see what I did. I see. So what we're gonna do, I picked 5 by 5 corner, which technically could work. You could use that one, but I'm actually gonna use quad corner. Okay, I'm gonna change this to quad mullion 5 by 5 corner. That's the one that I actually prefer to use. That's what I actually want. Now I can take this, slide this down, and I can have that nice clean corner glazing condition that we want. Okay? Look good? So that's what everyone should have for this particular assignment. Now, if you looked at the model that I had earlier, if you look at the one that I created from last semester, I actually added this header right here. All right, so let's just take this a step further and let's look at how we could do that. Okay, so the reason why I did this is because structurally you wouldn't be able to have, just being, I'm sure the few of the people that are in this class that maybe actually do this for a living, you can't actually have like 20 feet of glass without having a piece of structure in the middle. So you would likely, or you would need to actually add some type of a structural header in this storefront system. So what I would do is I'm going to select the mullion that I want to actually add that header to. And I'm going to go to Edit Type, and I don't think I've already created one. Nope, I don't, but I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to go to Duplicate, and I'm going to call this, let's call this 12-inch by 5-inch mullion, okay? So 12-inch by 5-inch rectilinear, or rectangular. And to make the 12-inch thick mullion, okay, I'm going to change the dimensions to what? What am I going to change these two dimensions to if I want it to be 12 inches thick?
6 inches.
6 and 6, because what this means, it says width on side 1 and width on side 2. So when you have that curtain grid line, it's saying how much mullion do you want on each side of the grid line. Okay, so you could actually stagger it if you wanted to. In most cases, it's equal, okay? But you may, like for example, let's say you actually have a, maybe an edge condition where you actually want the mullion to be completely on the inside of a grid line. You could do that if you wanted to, but in most cases it's going to be equal on both sides. So I'm going to change this to 6 inches. Whoops, let's go 6 inches, and I'm going to change this to 6 inches as well, and I'm going to hit OK, and see how that changed that mullion to a nice thick header. I'm going to go ahead and then select the rest of my mullions. I'm going to unpin all of those so that I could change them.
You can change them only when you unpin them, correct?
Correct. You cannot change them unless you unpin them because they're a part of the grid system, okay? They're a part of this type that you had already created. So by unpinning them, you're basically allowing yourself to edit that system that you initially created, okay? So I can then change this to 12 by 5. I'm going to do the same thing to this side. I'm going to unpin it, change it to 12 by 5. That's looking pretty good. If I click on this mullion right here, if I want them to actually show as one continuous mullion, what button would I click on? I'm going to go up here and click on Make Continuous. Okay, that allows you to tell Revit what you want your grid system to look like. Okay, so I'll click on another one over here, Make Continuous, and that starts to look good. So that's just an example, like down here. You know, do you want your mullion to look as it shows now, or would you rather that bottom mullion be a continuous frame, which ideally you would actually want that, okay? But it allows you just to have the freedom to make your storefront look the way that you want it to, okay? So you'll have something that looks like that. So that's about it. I'm not gonna go through, we have a couple other items that you need to place. I think everyone here is probably pretty familiar with how to place doors into your model. Is that correct? Or is there anyone that would like me to place any of those items? In the back? Okay, I'll do one of them really quickly. Okay, so it says on the east side, place a residential entry door. Okay, and so placing a window would be exactly the same process as we're doing. So let's go ahead and pick a residential entry door and let's place it on our east wall. Okay, so I'm going to click on level 1. So we have north up here at the top, and we have our east wall down here at the bottom. So we're going to place a residential entry door into this wall right here. So I'm going to go up to wall, or I'm sorry, I'm going to go up to door. Okay, and if I click on the little drop down menu, all I have are these basic, just real basic entry doors, okay? You could use those, but if you want to actually pick a nice residential door as it says in the prompt, you're going to go to Edit Type, And then what are we going to click on, class?
Load
Load, correct. So we're going to click on load.
doors.
And then doors. Okay, so we're going to go to our door categories. If you were looking for a window, which you'll have to do for this exercise too, you would click on windows. Okay, then you can go through and select the window that you want. All right, so we're going to click on doors, and then we're going to click on what? Residential, exactly. So you could select from these options right here. The difference between these different categories is that these are all just very basic door options, just very, 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 very basic, very commonly used doors. If you want to pick a more specific residential or commercial door, you would click on one of these categories. So we're going to click on residential, and then from here you can click on them until you get one that you like. Okay? So let's just click on this one. That looks fine.
There's an interior over there.
Interior.
Interior. Single interior. Yeah. Up.
Up. Okay, so here's one with glass. Yeah, that looks much nicer. Let's pick that one. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. You can then pick the size that you want, or if you really want to, you can just select all of them. Okay, I usually do actually like to select all of them. Hit OK. Yes. And then from there, it loads them all into your properties browser. Okay, so I now have every size already pre-made of that residential door. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pick a 3-foot by 7-foot residential door. That's pretty common, unless you want something different. Some people like a nice 8-foot tall residential door, maybe a 9-foot tall residential door. Whatever you want for this exercise is fine. So I'm going to pick 36 by 84. That is 3 by 7 foot. I think it says to make it white. Is that correct? I think it says to make it white. Okay. So how would we make it white? If we want to make this door white, what would we do to do that?
Change it from edit type.
Exactly. So we're going to click on edit type, and now we can go down to materials and finishes. Okay, and we can go through and we can custom. Yeah, we can custom make this door to whatever we want. And this is actually a really nicely made door, in that we can change the material on like 7 different components of this door. Okay, we can change the main panel. The main panel is probably a majority of the door. Okay, so from there I can change it from cherry, and I can change it to white. All right, I don't know if white is actually an option right now. Probably not. So from there I would go to create new material, and let's call this let's just call this door material white. Okay, and I'm going to go to graphics or appearance. I'm going to change the color of this to white. Okay, you could, if you want to be real specific, you could probably actually go find a wood and actually make the color of the wood white. So if you really wanted to get really, really detailed, and you were doing like a rendering and you wanted to actually see the grain of the wood, but you also wanted to see it white, you could do that. But for kind of simplicity reasons, I'm just going to go ahead and call this white.
But can we change the cherry or duplicate the cherry wood to create a white cherry wood?
How would you do that?
Can we do
Sure.
do that?
Yeah. So what we would do, so let's say that we wanted to change this cherry white or cherry wood to white. I'm going to duplicate this. Okay. I'm going to call this, why don't we call this cherry wood white. Okay. So cherry wood white. I'm going to go up to appearance. What would be the next step to this? If I don't want to edit this one so that it edits the original one, what would I need to do to not do that? Duplicate this asset. Yeah, I heard it in the back. That's exactly correct. So we always need to hit duplicate this asset, because if I change the stain to this to white, or if I change something else to, or any other component, it would change the original one. Okay. So from here, I'm going to actually uncheck stain, and I am going to actually, let's try changing this to white. I can think of a couple ways to do this. Let's see how this works out. Okay, this would actually be, I think this will actually end up working pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and change the stain to white versus another color. And I'm going to hit OK. All right, so the frame is now cherry white, and let's change our main panel to cherry white as well. Let's see. Okay, cherry white, okay. So glazing material is glass, that's good. Trim material, let's also change that to cherry white. Okay. Door handle, aluminum, that's good. Threshold, I can also change that to cherry white. and we're gonna hit OK. And now I can go place that door. We'll just place it about right there. And if you look at this in 3D, that starts to look pretty good. Let's look at this in realistic. Let's see how we're looking. So yeah, that is exactly how we would do that. Okay, so it's still a wood door. You can actually see the grain in the wood. Okay, but the door's white. Okay, so I'd say that's pretty successful. All right, so if you guys wanted to add windows, it would be the exact same process. Upload them and start to place them accordingly. All right, so that's going to be any questions about this critical thinking exercise? Anything that wasn't clear? Good? All right, so I'll stop the recording.